So first, I will provide you a quick update on task 5.3, just to give context about the discussion today. Then I will develop some concepts and our point of view regarding biodiversity certificates, especially contribution offsetting, credits and certificates terms, as well as biodiversity and nature concepts. And then we will have a 30-minute discussion, like Q&A and like sharing your points of view on what I will develop during the first 30 minutes, if that's okay for you. First, about task 5.3. So we have moved forward developing the protocol for implementing biodiversity certificates on each use case. So we have the first version that we have shared the previous week, and it's currently being read by use cases, and we are going to discuss with use cases this week and also next week to really go in the implementation of the biodiversity certificates protocol in an iterative way. So the idea is to take this first protocol and to work with use cases to adapt this protocol and to really start engaging stakeholders and review the protocol based on implementation. So at this point, we still have discussions on biodiversity certificates because all the terms used are not completely dead sets. We have our position and we think it's important to discuss it together, to have a common like words with stakeholders, and when we speak about the biocapital project in general, especially as some work has been done in work package 2 on biodiversity certificates, so we need to align between different work packages. So just to give you a first definition of what is a biodiversity certificate, the Biodiversity Credit Alliance defined in 2024 that a biodiversity certificate or biodiversity credits is a certificate that represents a measured and evidence-based unit of biodiversity positive outcome that is durable and additional to what would have been otherwise occurred. So there are different important points in this definition. The first is that they define biodiversity credit as a certificate with a measured unit of biodiversity. So it's really like being able to associate to each certificate a biodiversity outcome. It also raises the question of permanency of action sets and impacts for biodiversity, and additionality, because the thing is that biodiversity certificates should be used to complement action that should have been done without the use of biodiversity certificate, but not replacing it. So how does it work? We have field projects that implement positive action for biodiversity. These field projects emit certificates associated to biodiversity gains, and a company or any private organization can purchase a biodiversity certificate in the frame of its biodiversity strategy. So what we include or not include in the biodiversity certificate scope. So there are different levels of biodiversity certificates. We have the global level, meaning that companies can buy or finance actions relating to biodiversity certificates and align with global priorities. For example, those developed in the Global Biodiversity Framework. So it's not in the scope of biodiversity footprint of each company. So we cannot like sum a negative impact and positive impacts in the same reporting. And it's not necessarily connected to companies' activities, because actually there are some conservation priorities worldwide, especially in countries or regions where companies do not operate directly, but they can finance projects there, and this project generates certificates. So this type of action is subject to biodiversity certificate. Then the second scope of application is the local scope, meaning that company can finance projects connected directly to their activities and value chain. So really in the location or region where they operate, and they contribute to achieve local priorities in terms of biodiversity, restoration, and conservation. This kind of action can also generate certificates. And the last point is about really like implementing actions in the scope of the biodiversity footprint of the company. So really like reducing impacts in the value chain. And so here it's most about compensation or offsetting, meaning that in this case, companies directly operate actions in their value chain, and this is not subject to biodiversity certificates. As we said, the idea here is not to cancel impacts that have been produced in the value chain of the company. So that's really about the scope of application. So it leaves us to the distinction between offsetting and contribution. So offsetting is really about compensating residual impacts that are negative for biodiversity and caused by a development project especially. So it's really about construction and infrastructure projects having direct impacts on biodiversity. And so these projects must reduce as much as possible their impacts, and then they have to compensate or offset the remaining impacts. So this is generally regulatory. So projects have to implement offsetting measures. And the thing is that the scope is restricted to what we call dynamic impacts relating to construction projects. And it's really in an objective to have no net loss or net positive gain on a specific project. And it's directly linked to the impacts of the project. And requires a robust computation of biodiversity loss and gains in the projects. On the other hand, we have contribution, which is an action aiming at improving the state of biodiversity without compensating the negative impact. It's really about doing something positive aside from negative impacts. There is no existing framework today and robust framework for framing contribution. The scope is broader because the idea here is not only to work on impacts associated to the project, it's to also finance other or contribute to other projects that go beyond the impacts of the companies that are directly generated. And the objective is also more broader because it's to improve the state of biodiversity. And it's not computed in connection with biodiversity negative impacts, as I already said. There is another distinction between biodiversity credits and biodiversity offsets. It's I won't be redundant, but biodiversity offsets, it's really in the frame of the mitigation hierarchy. When you reduce and avoid your impacts, you can offset also the residual impacts. And biodiversity credits go further, allowing positive contributions. So it's beyond the mitigation hierarchy. And the purpose here is to reach goals, especially those developed in the global biodiversity framework. And also, biodiversity credits are mentioned as a solution in target 19 of the global biodiversity framework. What is important to consider now is that there is no international consensus on terms used. Should we say biodiversity credits or certificates, nature credits or certificates? There is no clear position, overall and consensual position on this. So here I put the different terms used by organizations. It's important to note that the European Commission developed a roadmap for nature credits in July. So it's the term they decided to use. Most common terms are biodiversity credits by EAPB or BCA and other organizations. And on the French project certificates for biodiversity, we are speaking about biodiversity certificates, and then I will detail later why. So the key points to bear in mind, and also because we've discussed with work package 2, is that these discussions are more about semantic, but we all agree in the consortium that the contribution approach should be favored rather than an offsetting approach. This deep dive, as I said, aims to align in position on terms used in a context where there is no international consensus. So we have some room to express what we think, and there is a need for convergence, so we can position on this point. And at this stage, what we should bear in mind is that we want to favor the terms that allow a maximum of flexibility for us and integration of works done on other work packages regarding financial mechanisms, for example, green bonds and payments for service ecosystem services, sorry. And we also need to favor terms that reflect our vision of the mechanisms to set. Yes. One other point interesting is about the lessons learned from carbon credit markets, because actually it's really frames how we think biodiversity certificates, and we need to bear in mind the issues raised in the carbon credit markets. So there are some elements about difficulty to quantify how much carbon is saved through these schemes. There is a question about leakage, because in some projects, deforestation has been avoided from one area but displaced to another area. There is a question of permanence, because protection schemes actually last for a few decades, but GHG emissions and they can linger in the atmosphere for thousands of years. Also, there is a question about displacement of indigenous peoples outside of their territories to develop projects, so it can generate negative social impacts. Another issue is about ghost credits, because as there are several different ways to calculate credits, some projects sometimes overestimate carbon credits, and it is also connected to the problem that there are financial intermediaries in the carbon credits markets, because it is private platforms that sell credits, and they take a commission, so they can maybe be tempted to give more carbon credits to projects because their business model is associated to the capacity of projects to generate credits. There is also the question of the scenario of reference, because actually sometimes projects overestimate the negative effects of actions, and carbon credits and offsetting are also blamed for giving companies a right to pollute or a right to destroy, because they can continue to operate their activities while revendicating carbon neutrality through offsetting. And the last point is about also the bias of auditing, because auditors are hired and paid by project developers, so there is a risk of lack of integrity and incentive to ignore concerns. So when we look at all these issues, there are also positive points, but we have some solutions to try not to replicate these errors also for biodiversity certificates credits. And among solutions is to develop robust computation methodology to calculate biodiversity gains. We all know that it's a real challenge. There are also like defining clear integrity principles, and this has been first developed in the BCA and EAPB frameworks. Another important point is to cut offsetting from options for developing biodiversity certificates, to involve local communities in governance and projects. Next week, actually, I will speak with EAPB about our vision of integration of IPs and LCs in the biodiversity certificates mechanism. Also, what we think is really important is to ensure that the platform which circulates biodiversity certificate is managed by a public institution with no financial interest, to reduce the risk of having financial intermediaries and business models associated to the certificates. Regarding the scenario of reference, also, the approach for biodiversity certificates should be different and more be about comparing like time 0 before action and time n after action, more than projecting a scenario of inaction, because it can leave room for overestimation. And also about auditing, it's more a question of organization and ensuring that third-party auditors are randomly selected with a standardized price to pay by each project. For example, the share of the project value, but it's really to ensure the unbiased process of auditing. So I just wanted to give here the lessons learned from carbon credit markets, because that's also explain why we prefer to use biodiversity certificates on our site. And before having a discussion and answering your questions, regarding the terms used, I wanted to give some definitions for credit, certificate, biodiversity, and nature. About credits, there is a question that credits are tradable units or marketable gains from biodiversity uplift or protection, representing verified biodiversity outcomes. So there is a question that the companies should not purchase certificates directly because they purchased a credit, or directly they finance a project. And actually the certificate is the precondition before the emission of credits or capacity to finance a project. So our objective is not to say that companies will be able to purchase certificates directly. It's not the point. It's to finance a project or to purchase credits. And we are not perfectly sure now on how should all this articulate in the process. But why we prefer to use in general the term certificate is that it's better reflect the idea of contribution to collective strategies, either local or global, and also to the involvement of local communities, while compensation or credits in general, it's really credit is associated to debits and to the possibility to cancel negative impact. So also regarding all the discussions about carbon credit markets, we think it's better to favor the use of the term certificate, and to avoid reproducing the mistakes and generating the same discussions because we also speak about biodiversity credits, while the approach we think is really different and is really based on experience of carbon credit markets as well. And also the term certificate is interesting because it's compatible with financial instruments developed in other work packages, because the idea is to really have like lots of financial mechanism to develop projects, and then the certificate is the concrete certification or validation of biodiversity outcomes associated to each project. So it's different than credits, because credit is a financial mechanism per se, while the certificates is more about having a next certification about what has been done on the project and what has been financed. And about the term nature and biodiversity, actually, biodiversity is a closer and more scientific term than nature. Biodiversity represents the variety of all life on Earth, which is really about living organisms, while the nature is living organisms plus all the ecological functions that are essential for their development. So, for example, the water cycle or other elements that are not directly living. So we are not dead set on the term to use. For now, we use biodiversity. And as I said, the EU Commission favors the term nature credits for now. And we should consider that if we use the term nature, it's really borders. So maybe actions only on water cycle or water quality can be included in the certificates, not only those that are really connected to biodiversity.